I'm Mary Maté, sitting in for Jimmy Dore here with Americans comedian Kurt Metzger. And talking about Ukraine, there's a new revelation of yet another NATO ally revealing that the U.S. blocked a peace deal. And this time, this comes from Naftali Bennett, who was the former prime minister of Israel. And early in the war, right after Russia invaded, in the first week, he started brokering talks between Ukraine and Russia. And this is what he said. He said that each leader has their way. Boris Johnson adopted an aggressive line. Macron and Schultz were more pragmatic. Biden was both, and that's it. But then he says this. After a peace deal was reached, a ceasefire was reached between Ukraine and Russia, this is what happened. He says, I think there was a legitimate decision by the West to keep striking Putin. Anything I did was coordinated down to the last detail with the US, Germany, and France. They blocked it, and I thought they were wrong. So what he's talking about there is after he brokered the ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia and also got concessions from both sides, Ukraine, according to Bennett, agreed that they would not join NATO. And Russia agreed, according to Bennett, that they would abandon their goal of demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, which is also their way of acknowledging that they're not going to regime change Zelensky. So both sides gave these concessions. And according to Naftali Bennett, the West blocked it. And he specifically names the US and UK for being the most aggressive here because they wanted to keep striking Putin. Or in a different translation, because it's in Hebrew, his interview, it was that they wanted to keep smashing Putin. Regardless, they wanted to keep this war going. And that's why, according to Naftali Bennett, they blocked a peace deal. And this is the latest source to confirm this. We've already heard from sources close to Zelensky that Boris Johnson came over to Zelensky in late March 2022. And this was after a different deal was reached between Russia and Ukraine in talks brokered by Istanbul. And according to these sources close to Zelensky, Boris Johnson told Zelensky that now is not the time to make peace with Russia. Now's the time to keep fighting. And if you make peace with Russia, we're not going to back you up, which made it impossible for Zelensky to make any kind of deal. So this revelation from Bennett about talks that occurred just a bit prior to that incident where Boris Johnson came over are the latest revelation of how the US and the UK blocked peace in Ukraine to keep this war going. So here's Michael Tracy. The former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett just confirmed what any rational observer could have surmised. Russia and Ukraine reached a preliminary agreement during the early phase of the war. Both sides very much wanted a ceasefire, Bennett said, but the U.S. blocked it. And Tracy goes on March 5th, 2022, 9 days after the invasion, Bennett secretly went to Moscow and met with Putin. Bennett says Putin agreed to two big concessions, renouncing the denazification of Ukraine, understood to mean regime change, and renouncing the disarmament of Ukraine. Bennett says that simultaneously to this, again, based on his own direct intensive involvement in the day-to-day negotiations, Zelensky also agreed to a big concession and would officially renounce NATO membership. I say to myself, wow, that's a huge shift, Bennett recounts. Anything I did was coordinated down to the last detail with the US, Germany, and France, said Bennett. As an impartial mediator, he said, it wasn't for him to make prescriptive determinations about the correct policy choice. I turned to America in this regard, he admitted. Well, that's a bad choice if you want peace.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Because he's not powerful enough. It's America that calls the shots. Because when the rubber hit the road and the parameters of a diplomatic settlement had been mutually agreed upon by both Ukraine and Russia, they blocked it, Bennett said, as in the US. And I thought they were wrong. And of course, just like every other revelation that comes out about the West blocking peace in Ukraine, this one has been uniformly ignored in U.S. establishment media, with one exception on the Tucker Carlson show. And here is Tulsi Gabbard talking about that with Tucker Carlson.
I have no idea why the former prime minister of Israel admitted this in public. I'm so grateful that he did. How can Biden, how can the New York Times, the Washington Post, how can all the cheerleaders for this refuse to acknowledge this fact?
This is huge. We could have prevented this. Our leaders, those in power, could have prevented this. And they didn't. And the fact that it's not being widely reported is incredibly revealing. And it just shows they never really cared about the Ukrainian people. They never really cared about the American people or democracy or freedom, all of these other things that we hear them giving so much lip service to. It reveals what they've really wanted all along, which is to overthrow the Putin regime. And they saw this war as an opportunity that would help them achieve that goal. And it's disgusting to know that that this is true. The thing is, Tucker, you and I both know with regime change wars, no one can predict how they'll end up or what happens next or who's going to take over. But we do know with Russia, because they've already, the writing is on the wall. We do know that in Russia, it's not going to be some, pro-Western or pro-democracy, power that goes and takes over. It's going to be someone that is far more hawkish and far more dangerous, creating a greater threat for the United States. The only way that this war ends is through a negotiated outcome. So unless something radical changes, something major changes, unfortunately, what we, the American people, will see, what the Ukrainian people will see, people in the world, is that this will continue to escalate, pushing us closer to a direct conflict between the United States, NATO, and Russia. And we've talked about where that could potentially lead. More dangerous weapons, more countries involved, and increasing that risk of a potential nuclear war.
It's so reckless and crazy, it's also completely beyond our control that this war for democracy has never involved a referendum. People are not allowed to vote on this. Most people are against it, but because they're so for democracy, they won't allow the vote. But I'm really trying to find, since I think this is going to happen, regardless of what you and I say, how does the U.S. conceivably benefit from this? Is there any benefit that you can see?
Well, we know who is profiting from this. The Biden administration and these pro-war Republicans.
Yeah, and she goes on to talk about the military-industrial complex and how there's support for this in both parties. And if you're someone who doesn't like that Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard are the only ones talking about this, and that's another reason to push progressives to, for once, stand up and support peace. Remember the one time they did, when those House progressives sent a letter to Biden politely asking him to support diplomacy, they withdrew that after 24 hours. And now we get more revelations that as all this was happening, the Biden administration was blocking every attempt there was to make peace in Ukraine.
How come Tucker, because, I watched him talk about the Chinese spy balloon.
Oh, I'm sure he
in on the spy balloon.
Yeah.
But why on the, is it just because he's already on the people that they wouldn't want to know this are already not going to watch Tucker, so that's why it's cool for him to be able to say the real thing?
I don't get why, on some issues, someone like Tucker Carlson can be, very clear-eyed about the proxy war in Ukraine, but then simultaneously push warmongering with China. It's interesting.
Well, does he have to make up for taking away from one war to stay on Fox?
But I will say this, he's had on people sometimes like Doug McGregor, the retired Army colonel, who have criticized the Cold War mentality around China. So it's, he has allowed on some dissenting voices.
He does have people on.
Yeah. But Kurt, guess which third-rate outlet tried to pour cold water on these revelations from the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. We've come across them already.
Business Insider?
Business Insider. That's right, everybody. Business Insider is here, just as they're here to try to tell you that Seymour Hersh is discredited and is giving a gift to Putin by reporting.
Oh, boosted by Russia. those pieces of shit want peace.
So just as Insider's here to tell you that, one of the best journalists of all time, Seymour Hersh, should not be listened to.
It took two of them to write this, by the way.
Two Insider.
Who are the reporters for Insider? Because this stuff all reads like, if, let's say, I don't know, you're going to go buy some gym supplements and you want to check and see if they were good online, and you read research and not only are they really safe and good, and is that what this is? This is how this all reads, like PR from some company or interest.
That's pretty much what they are. Yes.
Like how bills are given to Congress people that they don't write.
Exactly.
That's what this is.
That's what this is. Exactly. So whenever you need the national security state to validate one of its propaganda claims, you can always count on outlets like Insider to come out and justify it and attack people who challenge it with reporting like Seymour Hersh.
They're telling you who they are and right in the title. They're insiders.
Insiders, yes, they are. So here they are now trying to pour cold water on this admission from the horse's mouth from former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that the U.S. blocked a peace deal in Ukraine. And this is a headline: former Israeli Prime Minister rebuts claim boosted by Russia that the U.S. blocks a Ukraine peace agreement. It's unsure there was any deal to be made. So now they're trying to basically take Bennett's comments that he made in response to the controversy that he elicited by admitting that the U.S. blocked a peace deal in Ukraine. Now they're trying to take that and say that, he never admitted that there was a peace deal that was blocked by the U.S. Everyone, including Russia, are just twisting that. So here is Insider. They say pro-Russia commentators have focused on his saying that a peace deal was blocked by the West. But Bennett has clarified that no such deal existed and said the talks broke down because of apparent Russian war crimes. Now, that's not true. that Barrett clarified that no such deal existed. And the people who are going to tell us that are none other than the people who wrote this article itself, because they have to admit that later on. So remember that when they say that Bennett clarified that no such deal existed. Here's what Bennett actually said, according to Insider. He said that it's unsure there was any deal to be made. At the time, I gave it roughly a 50% chance. Americans felt chances were way lower. Hard to tell who was right. And then he says it's not sure such a deal was desirable. So he's not saying there was no deal to be made. He's just saying he gives it a 50-50 chance. But the point is the deal was being discussed.
Desirable to who?
Well, exactly. Not desirable to warmongers. And the reason why there was no deal in the end is because it was blocked by the U.S., which prevented it from happening.
Is this like when the Taliban was going to give us bin Laden and we said no?
Exactly. When Donald Rumsfeld said we don't negotiate with terrorists, and then gave us the Afghanistan war. And here's more from Insider. And here they are trying to like challenge, trying to say that Bennett said that they're trying to argue that Bennett said that the deal wasn't blocked. And this is how they put that. Okay, they say the English subtitles are flawed because the original interview was in Hebrew. The English subtitles are flawed. In the exchange, Bennett and the interviewer do not use the word blocked, but rather stopped. What's the difference? The U.S. stopped a peace deal or blocked it? It's the same thing. Blocked and stopped. They stopped it from happening. So they're undermining their own attempt to try to whitewash what Bennett said.
That's why I'm saying these all read like this. They're all like, you could immediately get a earful of bullshit as soon as it starts with like, which by the way, Russia loves
yes,
the thing
exactly.
they said.
Yeah.
As soon as they include that, like, you're reading some kind of PR thing.
You can't acknowledge facts if Russia happens to agree with them. That's pretty much what the rule is.
That's what disinformation means.
Doing live stand-up comedy in Tempe, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Nashville, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and become a premium member. Get access to all our content.